is schus of all of us to be able to ask the Rosh Kollel once again this year to address us at a Kollel dinner, as soon as I da. Rosh Kollel, please.
Before I begin, I just want to thank. Before I begin, I want to thank Rabbi Gibber, Rabbi Reuven Crystal for all they did to make this beautiful, beautiful affair. This is the Sudas Hodah. I came to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom, and I came to thank you. It morphed into something else. And the focus was shifted a little bit, more than a little bit, and I'm not 100% still trying to take it all in. But first and foremost, I want to thank the Rebbeinu. I want to thank HaShem Yisbarach for granting me a new lease on life, and granting me a restoration of my health. Neither of them do I take for granted. Thank you so much. I'm grateful to so many people who did so many wonderful things. I'm grateful to all of you, for those who davened for me, for those who learned as a schus for me, to those who recited Tehillim for me, to those who organized classes and shiurim, who took upon themselves kabbalos, who went to Kivrei Tzadikim to daven for me, who received brachas from various Kollel Yisrael, and all those who were there for my wife during this period, in my absence. They were calling, that you called, you stopped in, sent food, flowers, doing errands, doing shopping. I want to thank the local Rabbanim, Rabbi Cheskel Greenberg, Rabbi Mordechai Kolaski, Rabbi Pinchas Itzstein, Rabbi Chaim Goldberger, Rabbi Moshe Spira, Rabbi Victor Goldberger, Rabbi Adam Crystal, the Kollel Unit for everything that you did for me. I want to thank the doctors, Dr. Eli Gertner, Dr. Joey Greenberg, Doctors Nussbaum, who were involved in my case. I thank all the doctors, because I use all the doctors, but these were the specific doctors that were involved with my situation. And I thank you all for everything that you did. It says in Tehillim, and we said this chapter earlier in chapter 107, that was the long one that we said. 4 times it says in that chapter, Yodul Hashem Chastov Niflo Sov Bnei Adam, that a person has to thank Hashem, and then in addition to that, you have to relate the wonders to the children of man. That means there's a double obligation in the Sudas Hodah. Number 1, we have to acknowledge and thank Hashem for everything He did for us, for me in this case. And number 2 is you have to relate that, what those things were. What did Hashem do? What were the niflos? What were the miracles, the nisim, those kindnesses that were performed on my behalf? One has to tell them to other people. We say that also in the modim. When we say every day, we say Shmona Esrei, we say Nodelecha unesaperti lasecha. I will thank you, but in addition, nesaperti lasecha, we will tell over to others your praises for what you did. There's a special carbon that's called the carbon toda, a sacrifice that was brought in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, which is a Thanksgiving sacrifice. And it differs in 2 ways from the standard sacrifice. The standard sacrifice is to be eaten, the fats are burnt on the altar, on the Mizbeach, and the meat is consumed by the person who brings it, or by others, for 2 days and the included night. The Toda, the Thanksgiving sacrifice, has less time to be eaten, only one day and one night. The day you bring it, and the following, and that night. Or in addition, the total sacrifice involves 40 loaves that must be eaten as well. 4 by the Kohen, but 36 by the person who brings it. So the Netziv says, why is it that there's a shorter period of time and more to consume than the normal sacrifice, much more to consume and much shorter time, is because when you bring a carbon totem and you're thanking HaShem, so you know you can't eat it all in the given amount of time. So you have to perforce bring other people in and share it with other people. Therefore, the person who is bringing the Torah and thanking Hashem for all he did must involve other people in that. And therefore, the mitzvah is to tell over to other people. So when they come and they share your Torah that you're bringing for the fact that Hashem spared your life, you are telling others, you know what Hashem did for me, this is what he did, and this is why I'm bringing the Torah. So it has to be shared with other people. That is the reason why the time is diminished and the amount to be consumed is increased, to ensure that it is told to other people. So what I would like to do for a few minutes is to share with you some of the things that I thank Hashem for, that he did for me in the course of my bout with the coronavirus. I was sick for 10 days before I got to the hospital. In the beginning, it wasn't bad. I said to my wife a couple of times, if this is corona, it's not so bad. It's to be mindful of the story I heard from our cousin, Rabbi Mati Berger from Eshet Torah, who tells of the person who jumped off the Empire State Building, and as he's plunging to the concrete streets below him, he passes the 90th floor. And as he passes the 90th floor, he says, so far, so good. Well, in retrospect, it may not have been so bad in the early days, but it got a lot worse as time progressed. So, at the end of those 10 days, it was a Shabbos. After Shabbos, that Shabbos, I was very, very sick. That night, I fell down in the bathroom. In the course of the night, I fell down a second time in the bathroom. Baruch Hashem, that I did not get hurt neither time, which in itself was a tremendous bracha. But another Baruch Hashem is that because I fell down, it became crystal clear to us that I needed to go to the hospital. Dr. Joey Greenberg said it's not safe for him to be home. He must go to the hospital. Otherwise, we're going to go to urgent care, get an x-ray, and get some, I thought I was dehydrated, get some hydration. But he said, you must go to the doctor. So that, because I fell, Baruch Hashem, I got to the doctor, and got to the hospital. Had I not gotten to the hospital when I got to the hospital, things could have been very different because my oxygen level decreased precipitously when I was at the hospital. And had I not been at the hospital, I don't know what would have been. But I was there, and they took care of it immediately. So my wife gets on the phone with our own doctor, with our own family doctor, and she's holding for 26 minutes to speak to the doctor. She finally hangs up the phone. And Baruch Hashem that the doctor didn't answer, because had he answered, I would have gone to the University of Minnesota, which is a great hospital, but we would have had no advocate for us in that hospital. As a result of that, Baruch Hashem, we called my wife called Dr. Gertner. Dr. Gertner said that we also confirmed that we should go to the hospital, and we decided to go to his hospital, where he would keep a watchful and caring eye over me during that entire time. Baruch Hashem for Dr. Gertner's care, and Baruch Hashem that we ended up in Regent's Hospital. Now, when Baruch Hashem again, when I got to Regent's Hospital, I was the second patient that came in with corona. So there was a lot of nursing care. It was one-on-one, and there was excellent care for the most part. It was excellent care, and it wasn't like in other hospitals where they were overloaded. And a couple weeks later, after I was there, the ICU filled up with corona patients, and even after I left, they had to convert other units in the hospital to deal with the corona because there were so many patients. Dr. Gertner told me later on that at certain times there was one nurse for 15 patients. But I had one nurse for myself at a time. Baruch Hashem, I got to Regent's Hospital where I had the care that I needed and I had the watchful eye that I needed, and it was one-on-one, and it was wonderful in terms of that. So the second day I was there, when I first came in, we thought I was going home that same day. We were just going to get an x-ray, get some hydration and IV and go home. But it didn't work like that. And they sent my wife home and they said they'll call her when they have information. The information that they called her with was that I had pneumonia and I had to stay overnight. The next day, they saw that my oxygen levels had plunged, and they needed to intubate me. That's when my son Yechiel Mordechai says that they asked me, do you want to be intubated? And I said, what happens if I don't? And the doctor says, you'll probably die. And I was disoriented, and I understood it differently than he said it. I thought he said, I'm going to die. But that's not exactly what he said, but it's not exactly what he didn't say either. Anyway, but that's what I thought. So I was put on the ventilator. I was on the ventilator for 10 days. The first few days was a very grave situation. But then slowly the indicators started turning and shifting. One of the residents, I think it was a resident or a nurse, but I think it was a resident, told my wife that there were very few patients who were as sick as I was who ever get off the ventilator. And Baruch Hashem, I got off the ventilator. Baruch Hashem. I wasn't off yet. The 9th day on the ventilator, I was still in a coma. I was in a coma the entire time. It was an induced coma. And I was on very heavy sedation, medication, and I was out. But the nurse told my wife that the last thing that goes is his hearing. So when you speak to him, he probably can hear it. So people were speaking to me. I don't remember a thing that anyone said during that period of time, so I don't know. I think the last faculty did go. But anyway, I wasn't aware of anything. But a couple of my Einiklach and my son-in-law, Rabbi Ram Krohn, were learning on the phone. They put a phone on my bed next to my head, and they were learning, and they were just on the phone so that I should hear the learning. Well, on that 9th day, my grandson, Rafal Moshe Burton, from Brooklyn, I think that's where Rabbi Leaf and Rebbetzin Leaf are from. Okay, that's, yeah, temporarily. They're really from Minneapolis. Okay. But in Brooklyn, so my Einikel from Brooklyn was learning on the phone, and for the first time, as he was learning, I opened my eyes, and the nurse started asking me questions. I nodded, answers to the questions, and then she gave me some commands, and I responded to the commands. This was the first time that I opened my eyes. They were trying to wean me off the sedation in order to ultimately take out the ventilator, but I hadn't been conscious. I became conscious during that when he was learning with me. On the 10th day, which was Erev Pesach, at 2:15 in the afternoon, my wife asked the doctor, 2:15, Erev Pesach. It's after Bir Chametz, everything's going on, everyone's focused on Pesach. My wife asked the doctor, if everything proceeds in this direction, and you will be able to hopefully extubate, that means take off the ventilator, extubate my husband, when do you think it would be in the best possible scenario, the best situation? The doctor said in 24 to 48 hours. About 3 hours later, my wife gets a call from the hospital that I had been extubated. They took me off the ventilator right before Yontif. Baruch Hashem. So Baruch Hashem that it happened right before Yontif, because that way the cloud of gloom that would have perhaps colored the Yontif for so many different people, for mishpacha and friends and people who were concerned, wasn't there. Baruch Hashem. There's time to tell the people on the East Coast and everything. Baruch Hashem. It was wonderful, wonderful. The timing was perfect. Baruch Hashem. However, my wife was incredulous. She didn't believe it. She thought maybe it was a mistake. They said at 2:15 in the afternoon that it's going to be between 24 and 48 hours that they're going to extubate me. So what happened? So she felt that maybe it's a mistake. Maybe there's something wrong. They didn't do it the right way. she called Dr. Gertner, and as she was speaking to Dr. Gertner, he got a text from my doctor, Dr. Ham, who's probably not Jewish. And Dr. Ham said, "Happy Passover, your friend has been liberated." Now, I don't know, Dr. Ham is a female doctor. I don't know if she knew the connection between Passover and liberation, but the words rang so prophetically that happy Passover, your friend has been liberated right before Pesach. So and Dr. Gertner, he confirmed that it was a good thing, and the fact I was off, and that the doctors know what they're doing, and they know and it was the right thing to do, apparently. Well, a couple days later, my wife gets a phone call from Dr. Tran. There's another doctor, also a lady, and she says to my wife, "Do you give a consent for us to intubate your husband again, to put him back on the respirator?" My oxygen levels had fallen, and they were afraid that I needed it again. In fact, one of the nurses there was like trying to ask me, "Do you want to be intubated, or do you want to just go without the intubation, and we'll call the morgue?" But everybody didn't know this. This is a very heavy decision you have to. But anyway, they called my wife, and my wife said, "Of course he wants to be intubated. Of course he wants to." Baruch Hashem, they didn't need to do it. They gave me some nasal flow. They gave me a diuretic, which took some of the liquid out of my lungs, and then Baruch Hashem, I recovered. And from that day, I was doing very well. The Baruch Hashem, there was a possibility of that I would have had to go to a transitional facility before I come home, because I was so weak. I couldn't stand. I certainly couldn't walk. As my son mentioned, I couldn't press a button in certain buttons. I couldn't press. I had no power, no kayach. But I started doing physical therapy. Baruch Hashem, my body responded very well. I made sure, I was very aggressive with it, I must say that. And whatever they tell me to do, I did it in multiple times. And Baruch Hashem, they told me to sit down on the chair for half an hour. I sat for 3 hours. Or whatever they told me to do, I did it. I tried to do more of it. And Baruch Hashem, my body responded, and I was able, they had to teach me how to stand up and how to take several steps. When I first did it, they had to walk around the bed with a walker, of course, not without a walker. With a walker, I had to walk around the bed, and by the time I got to the other side of the bed, I was winded. I couldn't do it anymore. But then, eventually means in a couple of days, I was walking through the entire corridors with my walker, up and down the corridors, up and down. I still couldn't walk without a walker. I came home, Baruch Hashem. They sent me home. I didn't need the transitional facility. I went home after a total of 18 days in the hospital. Baruch Hashem, I started to walk first with a walker, and then without a walker indoors, and then outdoors without a walker. And Baruch Hashem for everything that I finally got my strength back, and Baruch Hashem that I'm here where I am. I would like to just share with you something that my son touched on before. This Erev Pesach situation where when my wife was told at 2:15 in the afternoon that it'll be 24 to 48 hours, in the best scenario, that they'll be able to take me off the ventilator, and yet in a couple hours later they took me off. I don't know what happened. I don't know how it changed. But I'll tell you something that happened from my perspective, and somehow, I don't know. If I don't know, what am I going to say? Well, I'll tell you what I do know, and then there's a part that I don't know. But the part that I do know is that I overheard a conversation. That day, I was already taken off much of the sedation. I was still on the ventilator, and there was a question when to do. I overheard a conversation, doctors, nurses, that we want to extubate a patient. We're going to extubate a patient. And I heard the doctor say, Gibber is not a candidate. Now, I was disoriented, grant you that. And I understood that to mean that Gibber is not a candidate today, and he never will be a candidate. They're not going to extubate me. Now, that was not the case for sure, but that was my impression of what was said. As a result, I felt I had to do something. I had to connect with the Rebbeinu Shem. I had to connect with HaShem in a way that that maybe I could overcome this. Because I thought I thought this was it. I thought this was it. This is life as I'm going to know it until whatever. This is it. So the Chafetz Chaim says in the beginning of the Mishnah Berurah and the Bir Halacha, the Chafetz Chaim talks about the 6 mitzvahs tamidiyos. There are 6 mitzvahs that one can perform anytime, anywhere, on any occasion. Wherever you are, you can do these 6 mitzvahs. And the 6 mitzvahs, and I'm sharing this with you because it's something that is worthwhile knowing and filing away in the back of your minds. One mitzvah is to believe and know that HaShem is the creator of the world. Took us out of Mitzrayim, gave us the Torah. Number 2, that there's no other God. Number 3, the unity of HaShem, which is a complex mitzvah, but it means that everything is dependent on HaShem. There's nothing that's independent of HaShem. That there's a mitzvah to love HaShem, there's a mitzvah to fear HaShem, and there's a mitzvah not to stray after your eyes and your hearts. That means not to go after heretical ideas or immoral thoughts. And the Chafetz Chaim, when he introduces these 6 mitzvahs, says, Ve'ein kates l'schar mitzvahs. There is no limits to how much reward a person can get for mitzvahs. So I decided at that time, I couldn't do anything at that time. I was intubated. I couldn't talk, I couldn't walk. Walking for sure, I couldn't talk, I couldn't do anything. But I decided that in my mind, I can concentrate on these 6 mitzvahs. And I went through each one of them, and I thought about it, and I tried to integrate that into my neshama and to internalize them. And I went through each one with all the aspects of each mitzvah. And I went through 6. It took about 15-20 minutes to go through them in my mind, and I did it again and again and again and again for 2 to 3 hours. In fact, I was identifying different ceiling tiles in the ceiling with each of the 6 so that I wouldn't lose focus, and I would keep going and going and going and going. At the end, there was no end, but finally they came in to extubate me. At the end of there wasn't that. I would still be doing it now if they didn't come to extubate me. So they came to extubate me in the middle of this. But I was doing it for 2 to 3 hours. Ein kates l'schar mitzvahs. The Chafetz Chaim tells us that there's no limits to how much reward you can get for doing a mitzvah. And here I was doing the 6 mitzvahs, hours and hours. It's the only thing I could have done. And they extubated me. They said before that it's going to be 24 to 48 hours. I don't know what changed, but I do know. What I do know is that I think my son made this observation that everybody did so much for me, but I didn't do anything for myself. What did I do? What chus did I have personally to merit to get off the ventilator? So everyone had done so much. So HaShem was sending a message, whether they said it, they didn't say it, whether they meant it, they didn't mean it, but it was meant for me to understand it that way. And I did understand it that way, and I knew I had to do something and do something fast and do something very, very, very something that would be make a big difference. So I want to add this last thing, and that is that when we thank HaShem, the word taida in Hebrew has a double meaning. It means to thank, but it also means to acknowledge. Like to be modeh b'miksas, in other words, to admit to something. You can't thank unless you acknowledge that something was done for you. If you don't acknowledge it, you can't thank it. So thanking implies acknowledgement. And that is really a great challenge and something that I have to deal with, we all have to deal with, to see Hashem's hand in our world, to see that things that are being done for us, we have to acknowledge that they're being done by Hashem. It's easy. We live in a physical world. Everything around us is physical. We're a physical body, and therefore we tend to look at everything from that perspective. But really, there's Hashem behind the scenes. There's the spiritual where we can't see, but we know it's there, and we have to realize and internalize that everything is happening from Hashem. Hashem is doing it all. But it's not easy to see that, and we have to acknowledge and see that, and then we can thank Hashem. And I want to end with this Dvar Torah. And a few weeks ago in Parshas Shlach, the Meraglim, the spies, came back from Eretz Yisrael with a report that it's impossible for the Jews to enter the land of Canaan and to conquer the land. The people of Canaan are too powerful. There's no way in the world we're going to be able to win this war. And there were two spies, Kollel and Yeshua. He said, no, on the contrary. They said, Vashem itanu al tiraum. Hashem is with us. We have nothing to be afraid. And they also added, Sar Tzilam. The tzel of these nations is gone, has disappeared. What does tzel mean? So tzel means the shadow. The shadow of these nations is not there. So what does that mean? It's not clear. Rashi says that the word tzel can mean one of two things. It can mean shadow, but it can also mean shade. If it means shade, it means protection. It means the shade means the protection. So it means that which protected these nations until now is no longer there, so you can go in and take over. What protected them? So Rashi has two explanations. One is that the presence of righteous individuals, like Eov, would have protected them in the past, but they're not there anymore, so you don't have anything. So that which has been a shade and provided shade for them is no longer there. The Ramban interprets the word to mean shadow, not shade. I would like to suggest the following. In our world, Hashem has hidden himself in our world. Hashem has made it, Hashem, in order to balance, to create the perfect balance that is necessary for us to have Bechira, to have free choice, Hashem did not want to make himself overly present or overly seen in the world, because then a person would always do the right thing. He didn't want himself to be too hard to see, because that person will always do the wrong thing. So Hashem wanted to create the perfect balance where a person could choose to do the right thing, and if he wants to choose to do the wrong thing, he'll deny that there's a rebellion, he'll deny that Hashem can do it. So you can go either way. He wanted to strike that balance. Before there was a world, all that was present in the world was Hashem's presence. There was nothing else. If somehow we could go back in time to that place and imagine it, which is impossible for a finite being to imagine the infinite, but if somehow you could imagine, you would have just have experienced the presence of Hashem. Every level of creation was another veil that descended to hide Hashem's presence in the world, until, with 10 utterances, Hashem created the balance that he felt was the perfect balance, that he knew to be the perfect balance, and Hashem is hidden in this world. But it's our job to find him. What is a shadow? A shadow is when you have something opaque, which does not allow the light to penetrate through it. So a shadow is cast because the light is all around it, but doesn't go through the opaque object. That represents Hashem is light, and darkness is the absence of Hashem. In other words, when you have a shadow, that represents that there's something that is not allowing you to see the presence of Hashem, not allowing you to see the light. So it casts a shadow. That shadow means there's darkness. You don't see the light. Everything in this world is casting a spiritual shadow, because everything that's in this world in some way deters us and doesn't allow us, diverts our attention from the presence of Hashem. If there be nothing in the world, we would see Hashem. Everything in the world diverts our attention from Hashem. So everything in the terms of the presence of Hashem, in terms of spirituality, everything in the world is casting a shadow that we cannot see Hashem. What Yeshua and Kollel were telling the people is that when we come into Eretz Yisrael, the presence of Hashem will be so clear, and that, as Rashi tells us from the Medrash, that they wouldn't have even needed weapons to. They would not have needed weapons to. They would not have needed weapons to conquer the land. They would have fallen like a house of cards, and the presence of Hashem would have been so clear that even when you saw the enemy approaching you, you would have seen the presence of Hashem. They would not have cast a shadow. They would not have obscured. They would not have directed your attention away from Hashem to them, and they would have never cast a shadow. The light would have gone right through them, meaning that it would be so clear that Hashem is doing everything for us, we have absolutely nothing to fear. So we live in a world which is full of shadows, where it's hard to see Hashem. The light is obfuscated. The light there's barriers to that light. Don't allow us to see the light. It's our challenge in this world to see the light that is hard to find, but it's there, and the more we recognize it, the smaller the shadows become. And the more we recognize the presence of Hashem and the shadow and those things which take our minds away from Hashem will no longer take our minds away from Hashem, and we'll see and we'll understand and recognize the presence of Hashem. My tefillah and my bracha is that we should all see the Ribbon Shalom in our lives, see the hand of Hashem directing our lives, seeing the hand of Hashem doing all the wonderful things that He does for us, understanding that that's where it's at, that's where it's coming from. It's coming from the Ribbon Shalom. And with that, in Mitzvah Hashem, the shadows will get smaller and smaller, and our connection to Hashem will become bigger and bigger and stronger and stronger. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for everything that you did for me.
Okay, there's going to be a quick Ma'ariv over there on the side. If everybody can help clean up, I'm not sure what that entails, but we really do need to be out of this space soon. So thank you all for coming. Again, what more can I say? Thank you. Good night.